Hello, my name is Mitchell Rabin. I am the host and producer of a cable television show here in New York City called A Better World. The show is also aired in other locations across the country. Recently, I had the pleasure and honor of interviewing Dr. Gary Young, president of Young Living and naturopath. We had a very pleasant time on the show, and I learned a lot about the nature of essential oils, their therapeutic value, and a lot about Gary Young and what he's up to with this company. I was very impressed with everything that I heard and decided that I wanted to get involved myself. So I have. Part of that involvement is bringing this videotape to you. And so the fact is that Gary and his wife Mary told me that they enjoyed the interview very much. They felt it was rich and informative, easy flowing, casual, and enjoyable. And as a result, wanted to make it available to distributors, new and existing alike. So therefore, I have put this together for you all to see. Just a couple of words I wanted to share with you on a personal note of one of the other features of Gary Young's work and life that impressed me very much. Gary shared with me during the first part of the show that he himself had had a serious logging accident up in Canada some years back. And the doctors told him that they saw no opportunity for him to get himself out of the wheelchair. There was no amount of physical therapy, there was no amount of anything that they felt they could do. So what Gary did, and I consider him very noble and courageous for having done so, took it upon himself to study naturopathy, nutrition, herbs, different forms of healing, and of course essential oils, and was able, after years of work at it, get himself up and out of the wheelchair, to the point that in fact he ran, he told me, half a marathon with his son years after the accident. That was just a dream to where he had been. And now I believe he is fulfilling yet another dream. He's bringing the wisdom of the ages to America. That has been embodied in the world of essential oils from the time of the ancient Egyptians and other great indigenous cultures across the planet. He has managed to put them together in such a way that they are accessible in an easy way to those of us interested in using this very simple, very effective, very cost-effective method of creating greater healing and health for ourselves here in America. So it's on this note that I want to introduce the video, the interview, and welcome you all to essential oils and the work that Dr. Gary Young is doing. Welcome back to A Better World. This is your host, Mitchell Rabin, and stay tuned for another very fine show today. We have Dr. Gary Young, and we're going to be continuing talking about essential oils and the research that he has done, which has been extensive all around the world into essential oils for the healing of all manner of different kinds of very serious conditions. And we're going to be looking at a French medical text, as a matter of fact, and some of the work that has been done in hospitals all over Europe, where they've been using essential oils for years. And really, we're the only so-called civilized nation that's still not using the wisdom of the ages in the form of essential oils for clinical work. So on that note, I want to welcome you, Gary. It's a pleasure to have you on the show again.
Good to be back.
Good. So would you like to show us a little bit of what you discovered when you were studying at the University of Geneva and what you found they were doing in the hospitals with essential oils?
It's exciting, Mitchell, because this happens to be Aromatherapy Medical Encyclopedia Exactamento. This is one of the textbooks that I've been learning from, and the two authors of this text, Dr. Daniel Pennewell, has been here in the U.S. 2 or 3 times lecturing and teaching. Pierre Francombe. Pennewell's an MD, Francomb's a chemist and scientist. They're the two authors of the medical textbook, and this is one of the more predominant textbooks that are used by the doctors in France. And it's very interesting and very well documented. It is in French, however, and so it helps if you know a little French. But it's interesting because right in the beginning it shows the oil molecule found in the leaf, and steam distilling opens up the membrane that this oil molecule is released, and the oil molecule has a little membrane, as you can see right around the edge here. Whoops. And when that goes through the condenser and it's cooled, then that membrane breaks and lets the oil out. So that's how the oil can be extracted without damaging it, providing that it's maintained under low pressure and low temperature. And one of the problems we have today, which we'll probably talk about a little more, but with high pressure and high temperature, it breaks that membrane right inside the cooker. And then it alters the chemistry of the oil. So if you're looking for oregano, for example, that has high phenol and senol activity for antiviral purposes and antifungal purposes, you lose it because it alters that. And so the distilling is a very, very fine art that has to be carried out precisely in order to get the oil quality.
Right.
And so
without altering the chemistry.
Exactly, without altering the chemistry. If you're just looking for perfume oils where you're just getting a fragrance, then you can go with that. And also they use a lot of chemicals in the extracting because they can increase the production, up to 21% with using chemicals. But you can't separate a chemical from an oil afterwards, even though some chemists will say you can. It's not true. This here picture we're looking at is the oil beadlets that are found in Brazilian rosewood bark. And so the oils are extracted with distillation from bark, from needles, from roots, from the flowers, leaves, stems, stalks. The entire plant can be used. And of course, we distill trees and shrubs and flowers and herbs as well. And some of the other things that we look at in here that are really interesting, of course, the chromatograms. This is how an oil is analyzed, so we can determine the constituents that are in the oil and also the percentage of the constituents. Now, we can refer to that as a chemical element. We call them constituents, like an alcohol, an ester, an aldehyde, a bronyl, a sesquiterpene. These are all constituents or chemical elements found within one oil. And one plant can produce as many as 800 different constituents within that oil. And so we have an incredible range of activity. And this is why our medical profession, in my opinion, that we're not so successful with making drug medicine, because they will find an active ingredient, like they know aldehydes are calming and sedating to the nerves, and so they'll make a chemical product like Ritalin to calm children down. But then they have a reaction to it, side effects. But when you look at lavender, for example, it has high levels of aldehydes. They are calming and relaxing, but all of the other 300 constituents are in there to balance it, so there are no side effects.
Yep.
And it makes it beautiful that way. So we can't beat. And then we go on in this book.
You can't beat nature, is what it comes to.
And this here is just some of the research that was conducted.
So the essential oil, you're not pulling out, you're not extracting one of those 300 constituents or 800 constituents. You're using them all together.
All together,
in the particular oil.
Yeah. And just coming back to distillation a little bit, because this is really a key factor, because we're moving away from the old ancient art of distillation, because it's a very expensive distilling plants. When you realize that lavender takes 200 to 275 pounds of lavender to produce a pound of oil, and it takes 2 hours in the chamber to get all of the constituents out. Or cypress, for example. I mean, we're talking about a conifer where we're distilling the pine needles and the small branches. It takes 1.5 tons of cypress to produce 1 pound of oil. And in order for you to be able to get the best quality of oil, it's got to be in the cooker at under 240 degrees at maximum 5 pounds of pressure for 24 hours. And so when you think of the labor-intensive, it makes it very costly.
Sure.
Well, Spain right now is one of our biggest producers of cypress oil, and they only keep the cypress in the cooker for 45 minutes at up to pounds of pressure and upwards of 400 degrees of steam temperature, because they're interested in the fragrance for the perfume industry.
Oh.
And so you can't get it out. In fact, we did a research 3 years ago that was really interesting in southern France with the distiller that I work with there. Mr. Esview, and he's one of the older distillers, or one of the older distillators in southern France. And we distilled a batch of cypress oil for 18 hours. Took the oil into the laboratory and had it analyzed, and there were 18 of the primary constituents were missing. And then we went back and distilled the cypress for 24 hours, and all the constituents were in place.
Oh.
So modern technology, see, is trying to promote us to go faster, you know, easier distillation because of our cost of labor is high.
Sure.
And go for the production, so they're using chemicals, they're using different types of chambers now where they force the steam from the top down through instead of let it gravity feed up through. And this has been really an interesting
It doesn't
study.
work. That's what you're saying. It doesn't work.
They can get the fragrance, but this is the other interesting part. That with the high pressure, the high temperature, it fractures that membrane, alters the constituents within the oil, and when that happens, you also lose constituents, and it will alter the fragrance. But Americans don't know that because their nose hasn't been trained. So they'll buy a bottle of lavender off the shelf in the store for $5 a bottle and think that they're getting pure lavender oil. And it doesn't exist. You can't buy pure lavender oil for that price in France.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a lot.
Sure, a lot more than meets the nose.
A whole lot
as
more.
they say. Right.
And of course, what we have here in America are oils being imported that are high pressure, we call them perfume oils that are distilled for the perfume industry. But this is the interesting part. Why are we getting perfume oils in the U.S.? Because the laboratories in Gras, like Fragonard, Polynard, Molinard, are the three largest ones in the world, actually. They will only buy the finest quality of perfume oils. Now, as I call them perfume oils, they're the ones that are distilled at high pressure, high temperature. All right? But what happens is a distillator will put plant in the chamber. He will charge it with steam and chemicals, take the first extraction off. That goes to the perfume business in Gras, France. Then he will charge the chamber a second, and a third, and a fourth time. That stuff would not be accepted in the perfume industry in France. That's exported out to America.
Oh.
And then what they do, this is what's really interesting.
As perfume.
As essential oils.
Oh, it's essential oils.
As essential oils, yes. And then what they do is like...
But it still doesn't have all the constituents,
It doesn't have all the constituents. But what they do to enhance it a little bit, like lavender, for example, the primary constituent in lavender is linalool acetate. And that should make up about 42 to 46% of the lavender oil in its activity. All right? They synthetically make the linalool acetate and put it inside the lavender up to 60% of that lavender perfume oil, because the fragrance on your second, third, fourth running is very decreased. And that's what comes to the U.S.
I see.
So people who do not understand the
watered down oil,
synthetic, and then on top of that, that's not bad enough. Listen to this. They bring it to the U.S. and they add propylene glycol to it. So then someone goes in that has an allergy, you know, to synthetic perfumes, buys what is labeled on the shelf, a pure essential oil of lavender, goes home, puts it on, and they have a reaction. And then aromatherapy, essential oils, has a bad name. And 98% of the oils coming in the United States will come in under that category. So our market in the U.S. is really saturated with adulteration, synthetics,
corruptions of the real thing.
Exactly.
Corruptions of the real thing.
And the reason, if we think about it, I mean, people are saying, well, why? Why? Well, when you realize you can buy one of these synthetic, what I call synthetic, perfume-grade essential oils for 50 cents a bottle, bring it here and sell it for $5 a bottle, when the pure stuff will cost between $15 and $20 a bottle, there's a big profit margin, and it will attract more of the market because people don't know the difference. So here in America, we have to educate and we have to learn.
I'd like to go into two areas, since, first of all, that you brought that up, because you're involved, you have your own farms where you are growing the plants Is that correct?
Yes.
Are these organic plants?
We
Or
grow.
what is your procedure in the growing of the plants? And apparently there's something in your distilling process that is different, that is distinct and unique,
That's true.
that distinguishes the results of your work from everything else that's out there that people are using, and it's being passed around as aromatherapy.
That's true. I spent...
I mean, surely there are other good aromatherapy products out there. I mean,
there
have
are.
to be.
There are some good products out there,
But I think they're probably
limited.
few and far between.
Yes, and one has to really be selective and know the people behind and know who's supplying the oils. That's really important. Know who is doing the distilling behind that oil.
Got it. So what suggestions could you make to people?
Well, one
so
of the
they
things
guidelines.
that I teach, because of seeing this happening years ago,
Yes.
I spent altogether a period of 5 years living in France 2, 3, 4 weeks at a time, working with the distillators, studying and learning how to distill. And I have built
In a
4
traditional way.
in the ancient traditional art of distillation. And I've built 4 distillers. We are now involved with a farm in Upper Egypt, one in southern France, in Midi, in Provence, and then we have our own
I used
farm.
to live in Provence.
Did you?
Oh yeah, Aix-en-Provence.
And so you know the area around Cisteron and Céteron, Lyon.
Somewhat. Yeah. I was a very poor student. I didn't do much traveling then.
Well, that's the area where we're
Yeah.
at. And,
It's beautiful there.
oh, it's gorgeous. We have...
and the clay, the soil is extraordinary.
yes and no. The farm
Beautiful. It's certainly beautiful to look at.
It's burned out, but it is beautiful to look at.
Well, what do you want? They've been growing grapes there for thousands of years, you know.
Exactly.
But, yeah.
But that's what's important, you know, is having good quality soil. And our farm in northern Idaho is organic. It had not been farmed for 32 years. Has never had chemicals on it. And it's been a challenge. This past summer we had 26 farmhands working 6 days a week just fighting the grass and the weeds and keeping it controlled. And we've finally gone to now a thermal burning system, what we call a thermal weeder, where we burn the fields with heat to kill the rhizomes and the seed of the weeds and that. And after working the soil now, this will be our 4th year, we've pretty much got the weeds and the grass out of it. But we use absolutely no chemicals.
Great.
We're trying to restore the soil in France, but it's a big job because they've used a lot of chemicals there.
Oh, that's been the problem, yeah. As well as it's been used for so long.
Yes.
It really has been.
Hundreds of, like you say, thousands of years. And you know, when people talk about organic oils, unless they're growing it personally as we are, where they've controlled it, where they know the soil, there really is not such a thing as organic oils. So, and the amount that we're producing, you know, is not even enough for what we need, because it takes a long time to build up and create that. Lavender takes 3 years to get it from the seed into its first production year, and it's very expensive. You know, when you realize it takes 8,000 plants for 1 acre, and it starts at $2.25, $2.50 a start. So that's why not everyone jumps into it, you know, to do it.
Sure.
And we started out the difficult way, you know, putting up greenhouses, starting the seeds and just doing a little bit and taking some cuttings, and, you know, and it's been a long process. But last year we took our oils to Gras and had them tested, and they tested to be the finest in the world.
Really?
That we produced. So that was really exciting.
So they tested these against other essential oils used
Gras.
for aromatherapy, used clinically in Europe? Wow.
Yeah, it was really exciting.
Wow.
So, yeah, we were pretty happy.
So you outdid the French.
Yes, in fact, it was a standing joke last fall when my wife and I were there that my partner in France that looks after the farm there, he says, I see what's going to happen. We're going to be buying the oils from the Gary. But, yeah, it is fun to do and work with that.
Now, what is it about your distillation process that is different than the others?
Yes, there is. Mitchell, what I kept hearing all the time I was studying in France and learning distillation, and the 2 men that I spent a lot of time with and learned with was, I want to call them doctors, but they're neither one of them are. They're farmers, but really knowledgeable in their field. Mr. Espieu, Marcel Espieu, and Henry Veilleux. Mr. Veilleux was the first person I worked with. It goes back now, it's been 6 years ago. And He taught me the most. But these two men kept telling me the same thing. The key to getting the finest quality oil is zero pressure and low temperature. Because of their chambers, the way they're built, where they just use wood fuel and tires and straw, they are not able to control the steam as they would like because they have to use large volume. And so they'll build up 5 to 8, 10 pounds of pressure within the cooker because they don't have that control on it. Well, when I built my third distiller 2 years ago, I was working and looking at how we could do this, how we could deliver the steam. And I got a concept in my mind to try to experiment with putting the steam into a separate chamber and then going into a manifold system and then letting it vent through ventricle ports into the chamber and not using any valves. And so I worked with this and we perfected this system. And we built the largest distillery in North America this past year. 2,550 liter chamber, stainless steel, vertical, and the steam goes from the boiler into what would be called a steam separator. So all the condensation can drop out, and it depressurizes the steam within the separator. And then it flows from there by gravity into a steam manifold under the cooker. And then from there it goes through the ventricle jets into the bottom of the cooker, into the plant chamber at zero pressure, just gravity.
Wow.
And Mr. Esview, he was just really excited when I showed him the oils and he tested them and sampled them. He said, "Oh, Getty," he says, "this is the finest quality." He says, "You found the secret." And when I sketched out he was very, very excited. He says, "You build distillers for us now."
That's great.
If I have time.
Right. But still, it's a great compliment.
Yes, it really
was.
was.
Here's a group of people who've had this as a tradition for a long time.
And it's sad because we see the tradition dying out, and the modern technology coming in.
Sure.
And that's been really a heartbreak to me.
Would you go into some of the effects that the essential oils have on the human body?
Oh, would love to.
Especially just talk about, if you would, we're such a visually oriented, as people are watching the show, visually oriented society, and we are so actually out of touch in general with our noses and the olfactory sense. And it's actually the olfactory sense which is the oldest of them all.
Yes.
And in a sense the subtlest and most powerful of them all. So that there would be a healing modality based on that, it would seem to me, just purely logically, that it would be the most potent we have.
Yes.
So maybe you could elaborate on that, on maybe some of the physiology of the effects of the oils.
Let's do that, and let's go back a little bit, if I may, to establish a little bit of history and foundation.
You know, and even before you do that, I want to do that. I want to let people know that they can get more information locally about you and your work through Diana Vivante, who is here in New York, and Alan Steinfeld. And you can reach Diana at 243-4196 and Alan at 473-6388, okay? And so now we'll go right back to Gary Young, and we're talking about aromatherapy.
Excellent. Okay, going back just a little bit in history, because many of you may not know how ancient essential oils, what we coin phrase aromatherapy, happens to be. And it has been determined now that the Egyptian people are the fathers of medicine, the founders of medicine, and it has been discovered through the translation of the Ebers papyruses and hieroglyphics and scrolls, etc., that the Egyptian people were using essential oils 5, perhaps 10,000 years before the time of Christ. So we know it goes back quite some time. When they opened King Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, it was very exciting because they removed 350 liters of oils from his tomb. And as they examined this oil, they were in alabaster jars, and I have seen some of the jars. The inside of the jar had a incrustation of about maybe an inch, inch and a quarter, where the oil had solidified with the waxes and that in its reaction to the alabaster. But inside, where the oil was still liquid, as they tested it at Cairo, this oil was just as pure as if it had been freshly distilled. And the ancient tradition was that the
incredible.
oils had more value than money, more money value than gold.
Right, than gold.
More, because they found a lot of the tombs where they opened the tombs years ago, the robbers, and they took the oils out but left the gold. And so we know from this that the oil was very, very valuable.
Yeah.
Well, when we think about that, and of course I've had a beautiful opportunity of not only going in the crypts and the temples and studying this and photographing walls. In fact, I've been asked and have been able to photograph walls that have never been photographed ever before.
Really?
And we've taken these photographs to the Cairo University and we've started the translation work. And it's really exciting to see that the ancient Egyptians, not only did they use this for medicine, but for their spiritual rituals, but they also practiced a ritual that was extremely fascinating to me, and I'll come back to it in a little bit, but because I don't want to get off course here too far.
Okay.
But I want to come back to it because it's really important, and that's what we call today cleansing the emotions, or clearing the emotions. They called it cleansing the flesh and the blood. The Bible refers to it as breaking the lineage of iniquity. And we've translated a lot of that work now. It's been really exciting to see that. So we'll come back. But
please do.
What I want to follow with now is bringing together the ancient work of the oils and the history behind it that I've had the beautiful opportunity to study and research, which is what took me to Egypt and to Israel. But we are pretty much associated with the reference frankincense. And everyone knows frankincense. In the Bible, there are 188
frankincense
references.
And myrrh.
Yes. In fact, here I just have a computer printout. Actually, this is only part of it, of just the references in the Bible on essential oils. The book of Exodus is incredible. It talks about, after the art of the apothecary, formulating blends for the healing of the sick. Frankincense, referred to as the holy anointing oil. And so I got real excited about that, and I studied in the British Museum Library about some of the legends and history of frankincense oil. And it talked about how the ancient priests and the ancient physicians used frankincense because every time they applied it to one of their sick people, the person was well almost instantly. Like the next day, the next hour, the next moon, the next sun. It was incredible. But when we take that information and we also couple it with the story of frankincense and myrrh coming to the Christ child, being given to the Christ child, we look at that and we ask, why? Why? Frankincense was the most prized possession in the entire world at that time. The most prized possession.
They didn't bring gold. They brought that.
That was the third gift, was the gold. Some people are saying, well, the gold that talks about myrrh, frankincense, gold was actually the liquid distilled oil of frankincense, because in the Arabic countries, the liquid distilled frankincense is referred to as liquid gold. So that's a question that's, everyone can run through their own mind and decide on. But it's so
what's the frankincense therapeutic value? What is it?
I'm going to show you.
Okay.
Okay. In our medical textbook, and if we can just zoom in here, we're going to show you what modern science has discovered now with frankincense oil that is very fascinating. This is the botanical name of frankincense, Boswellia. We're looking here at the principal constituents that are responsible for the therapeutic effects of frankincense. And here on the second line, we're looking at sesquiterpenes. Now, this is quite interesting because it has been discovered and only discovered as of recent as 1994. And I learned this in the medical conference in Grasse, France in September, that sesquiterpenes are responsible for the increase of oxygen around the pineal pituitary gland. Now, when you think about that and think about how that the ancient people believe frankincense brought them closer to God.
You bet.
When we excite that pineal gland, what's likely going to happen? Let's come back in on this one more time because I want to show you a couple more things here. Now here, we see in the medical textbook that it tells us what these properties have benefits for. And this top word here, if you can't see it, I'll read it to us, anti-catarrhal. The second one is expectorant.
I could use that now.
Yeah, that breaks up the garbage in our bodies and discharges that poison from our system. And then we come down here, and this word says anti-tumoral. And then we go over to the side here, and it says immunostimulant. My goodness, what do we need in our lives today? I mean, think about it.
Frankincense.
Yeah, and underneath the last one is antidepressant. So if you're oxygenating your brain, you're going to be
You can't be depressed.
No, you can't.
You can't be depressed.
What an incredible thing. And then you look down here. Now, if you come in here on this one, it says indications. doctors indicate it's used for in the hospitals. Bronchitis, asthma, and you come down here, ulcers. Then there's this word that's spelled C-A-N-C-E-R. I mean, and there's a big question mark behind it. Well, I asked the doctor, I said, why the question mark? He says, because at the time of this printing, all cancers had not been studied yet. But one cancer that has responded very, very favorable to this is melanoma, basal cell, prostate. Extremely exciting. And then, of course, beside that it says immunodeficiencies. Again, right here, immunodeficiencies. Well, what are some of these diseases we're dealing with today if they're not immunodeficiencies?
Sure.
You know, it's really exciting. So that's in the textbook. Now
That's very exciting. And that is a textbook, just to reiterate, that is used in France, and it is used by doctors in hospitals all over France, Germany, Switzerland?
Switzerland, even in England, doctors refer to this. In fact, Dr. Harkis, who I know quite well from the Warwick University, is very involved in research, refers to this textbook.
Very good.
So, yes, it's quite exciting.
Do you hear that, medical schools here? Please tune in. Get the message.
Yes. Essential oils are, without question, the most incredible complementary medicine that has ever been rediscovered by man. And I think that we all need to really open our hearts and open our minds and look at this and look to the fact that, you know, some of these things we call alternative, they're not there to do away with traditional medicine. They're not there to do away with traditional dentistry. But they're there to be a complementary adjunct and to be used as a very powerful thing, because the greatest aspect is they're non-threatening. There are no side effects with pure oils. That we know for fact. No side effects. And they don't have to be used internally, even though in different hospitals throughout the European countries, they do use them internally and have different ways of administering them internally. There are tremendous areas of research.
Are there two main ways, since you brought that up, and this is just a momentary aside, two ways. One is topical and the other one is through diffusion?
Through diffusing for inhalation. And this is the area where I get really excited because of the benefits we have. And we can talk, we'll go into that a little bit.
Okay.
Actually, this will be great, because I think this will help everyone to understand. If we can just come in on this. This
little
is just a little
olfactory orientation.
Yes, we're going to give you a little anatomy. You can see, and it's a little backwards for me, but this right here is our olfactory nerve. It connects right here to the amygdala. Now, this is in the center of the limbic system, which is the sense of smell. But the limbic system encompasses the majority of the endocrine glands in the brain. And what has been discovered recently
and the emotions, by the way.
Oh, the amygdala is the general that controls our emotions. And it has been said by Dr. Jean Ledoux from the New York Medical Center that the amygdala is the only gland that can effectively release the emotional trauma from the DNA of the cell. And his research says that sound does not cross the neural cortex and therefore cannot get to the amygdala and therefore cannot release emotion. So what he said, the only thing that they found in their research that triggered this emotional release was scent. And essential oils has a dual benefit. Number one, they carry a scent. Number two, they carry a bioelectrical frequency that is measurable and has been documented now in the University in Cheney, Washington. And we maybe touch on that a little bit if we have time. But what happens is when you inhale a fragrance through the nose, it'll go into the sinus cavity and to the amygdala in 1 second. From there, it goes to the pineal pituitary, through the thalamus, hypothalamus, etc. All of the endocrine system and the brainstem will be affected within 3 seconds to less than a minute. And what has been found on top of that is
why does it take so long?
Well, I'm not sure. And I think the reason it takes so long is because their equipment is not sophisticated to measure it faster.
Right.
That's my
I think
feeling.
you're right. I also think that's true, by the way, about the sound.
Yes.
I will swear, based on pure logic and intuition, that sound does cross that barrier, and this particular doctor has not found how it has happened yet.
That's right.
But the frequencies will cross, and sound is completely related to our emotional life, as is scent.
Yes.
I think those are the two primary senses that are related to our emotions.
Well, Mitchell, you touched on the key, frequency. That's the key to these things working that scientists haven't been able to document. You know, really exciting.
Yes.
But the things that they have discovered that the oils literally do, not only do they deliver oxygen to the brain through inhalation, that was discovered in Vienna, Austria in 1994, and was also discovered in Berlin University.
What was it that they discovered?
that deliver oxygen.
I got it. Okay.
Yeah, because they carry an oxygen-making molecule.
Phenols or
through the phenols.
Okay.
And so this increases our brain oxygen, which will increase our body oxygen.
Sure.
Okay. It also increases the production of neurotransmitters. It increases endorphin secretion. It increases antibody secretion, which goes to the immune system. So yes, in fact, we find a direct correlation to the immune system. Now, if I may show you another one here that's quite exciting.
Right, you showed something about dendritic growth. Is that?
Yes, the dendrites, the synapses in the brain. Now, this is some of Dr. Richard Restick's work, and I really want to compliment him for his great research down in Washington, D.C. And it's been really fun studying his work and following it. But what we have found with the essential oils, it increases the neurotransmitter of the neurons that are secreted out the axon to the dendrite. Now, when this happens...
From one neuron to the next.
Yes, this is a chemical that's released. It's a neurochemical, the neuron, and as it travels out to the end of the synaptic point, it converts to electrical signal, electrical impulse. So it becomes chemical, then electrical. And at that point, it fires, and I make a simple analogy, it fires like a spark plug, you know, creating that spark. And that spark then jumps the synaptic gap to the corresponding dendrite, following that back to the eyes, the ears, various parts of the body, where it stimulates, maintains, regenerates.
Rejuvenates also.
Rejuvenates, yes. And when that firing starts to decrease, that's when our eyesight, our hearing, our immune responses start to decrease. Well, what's been exciting in the research we've conducted, we have found that essential oils increase this neuron electron firing. And so it improves eyesight, it improves hearing, it enhances the entire body function. And so we're coming back from this ancient science that the Egyptians gave us, the ancient science we read about in the Bible for the healing and the anointing of the holy oils, and now modern science is documenting how this is working. It's really exciting.
That's fantastic. That really is.
Now, when we talk about some of the other things sharing here, let's look at what's going on in our world a little bit and why there's other areas this is really important.
Sure.
If we could
so it's definitive that the rubbing on of essential oils will increase the oxygen levels in the blood and in the nervous system.
Exactly. Also, the essential oils deliver and help increase the ATP, adenosine triphosphate, in the cells, which are your cell's energy fuel. And they also help the body in the metabolism of the vitamins. Pro-creators with vitamin A particularly and vitamin C. Really, really exciting.
So by using aromatherapy, essential oils topically or breathing them and inhaling, or both, it increases the efficiency, the ingestion of the absorbability, assimilation of vitamins, minerals. That's fantastic.
So when you're using them, they will help enhance your foods that you're eating.
And it's a food itself, is what you're really saying.
Yes.
If it's promoting ATP, then that means without eating food as such, you are also still nourishing your cells.
Nourishing the cells, exactly.
That's very powerful.
There's not a single element that is more powerful. And when we realize, just backing up a little bit, that the oil in the plant has the same duality as the blood does in our body. Same purpose, same function.
What do you mean?
The oil, well, the blood. Let's talk about the blood. How it carries nutrients, how it delivers the nutrients.
That's what the oil is doing inside a plant.
That's what the oil does in the plant.
I see, right.
And then we know that the Creator made the plant to feed us. You know, it kind of starts to come together.
Yes, that's
Pretty
right.
exciting. Yeah.
Very exciting. Yeah.
So now we can look at another aspect.
Go right ahead.
Where oils really, I believe, are going to be the key to our modern medicine today. A very key factor when we really look at it and study it and research it, and as it's being done in some of the universities in Europe and the Middle East now. We look here, this is, in fact, for those of you viewing, if you go to your library, you can get this magazine. It was Time magazine, September issue 94. If you don't have it and you haven't read it, you need to. You need to be aware of what's going on. We're just going to show you some real quick things here to lead into the next subject I'm going to talk about. And this here, just real simple at the top, we see where will the next virus appear? Well, this whole article is about anti-microbial microbial mutations, the new viruses that are going on, and it talks about it in this whole article. Well, this is exciting because what we know is that we need antioxidants. We need antimicrobial activity in our life. And let me just show you some of the research that's going on in Cairo University, where I've had the privilege to work for 3 years. And this is one of the papers that was published here. And it says safety evaluation of thyme and clove essential oils as natural antioxidants. Okay? Now this is really, really powerful.
And what does the paper suggest?
It goes on to talk about, in their studies and their research, the level of antioxidant activity they discovered. And also they've been using...
Through the oil, which particular oils?
Through the oils of thyme and clove, those two.
Thyme and clove.
This here is an article here on antimicrobial action of essential oils, just basically, and it goes on to explain the antimicrobial action is probably the one property of essential oils that has been the most known for the longest time, but has also been the least looked at. And then some of the other areas that they're studying. This is anti-microbial activity of some Egyptian spice oils. And so I'm just merely presenting this so you can see the research, the documentation. I have 91 papers of documentation on this research and the depth of it. So it is there. One other one that I think you'll be excited about, Mitchell, as exciting as the diabetic research going on in Egypt. This is a controlled study here showing blood glucose levels up over 200 in a controlled study, and then they used bitter fennel, and it dropped it down here to less than, we're just a little right around about 200. And then common dill, this is common dill oil, and we're down below 175. Coriander oil brought it down to almost normal level. And so this is really exciting.
That's fantastic.
So for those of you viewing out there, I want you just to understand there is tremendous research going on in this area.
Is the suggestion then, Gary, that from the use of the right oils, diabetics wouldn't have to use insulin?
There's research that's documenting that now. We don't have much here in the U.S. naturally, but the university is leading the world in that area.
Would that be because it's correcting the pancreas?
The metabolic balance of the pancreas, yes.
Wow.
And the oils also, you know, through that process and balancing, stimulating the ATP in the system, increasing the oxygen, you know, that it allows...
And affecting the hormonal glandular system is incredible.
All the way through. The entire endocrine system is affected. And that's what we see with oils. In fact, you know, it's interesting because the common talk throughout some of these countries where I study, they joke and they say, oils bring balance. They bring balance to the human body. And it's just so common to the people of these other countries where oils have been used for many, many years.
Sure.
The ancient Egyptians, they never were ever concerned about disease. I found a little book in Egypt that was called Egyptian Prescriptions. And that has been the most phenomenal little book. And it was taken from the translation of the Ebers Papyrus. And it talks about 81 different diseases and all of the formulas that they use to treat the diseases with. It's just incredible. But it's exciting to see these things happening. It's exciting to know that, you know, there really are answers out there, that we don't have to run scared. We don't have to be afraid, but we do have an incredible responsibility, and that is taking responsibility and looking at what we can do to improve our lives and protect our lives from these things that we're dealing with, like the flesh-eating disease,
bacteria and all that.
You know, the hantavirus and the Ebola virus and the hepatitis and tuberculosis and, you know, all these things that we're being plagued with.
Sure.
But, you know, we've lived in such a life believing that there are no answers. I mean, medicine can't even correct the common cold. You know, so...
I know, my life just proved it.
When you think of that, where's the hope of AIDS and cancer or lupus?
God, yeah.
You know?
Sure.
But ancient medicine has already corrected these conditions and has for thousands of years.
Sure.
So perhaps by going back a little bit, bringing ancient science into our modern technology and bringing them together, this is my greatest desire in this world, is bringing these arts together and seeing everybody in all walks of life, the medical field, the surgeon, the dentist, the practitioner, massage therapy, the chiropractor, the nature, all coming together and working together as one and not fighting and saying mine's better than yours.
Sure.
Sort of thing. But let's put all this knowledge together.
That's right. Well, what you're doing actually, I think, exemplifies the height of taking the ancient and mixing it with the new. Because here you've taken these ancient Egyptian formulations and prescriptions and you've put it into a modern context of a new distillation process, for instance, and so thereby taking the wisdom of oil use and using modern technology to create the finest oils that probably are better than they had back then.
Oh, absolutely.
You know?
Because when you know what I
With
say,
all due respect to them.
Yeah, exactly. But they had limitations. You know, in fact, it was interesting.
And I mean, there are powerful, powerful things to benefit from in the use of technology.
Well, we look at all of the things and how they, you know, the ancient Egyptians, they would do simple things like extracting the cedar oil. They would take wool cloth and wrap it around the cedar bark, soak it in olive oil, and then burn it. And the heat with the oil would pull the oil out of the bark into the wool cloth, and then they would press the oil out. Well, we know that heat does affect the oil.
The chemistry, sure.
Yes. And so it was a number of years before the Egyptians finally discovered the art of distillation, which was very crude in itself. You know, they would put everything in a vat of water in a big, you know, porcelain or alabaster container, and then heat it and let the oil just rise to the surface and skim it off. So it has been found that through the distillation chambers that are being used now, you know, the older method, that it is very, very superior. But the beautiful part, when they analyze the oil...
I mean, what you're doing now is superior.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
But even the oil they analyzed out of Tutankhamun's tomb was still had the active constituents in it. So, you know, it's really, the key there was, you know, not exposing it to a lot of heat. Or air. You know, chemicals and air and things like that. Of course, the pyramids, the tombs, you know, really preserved it nicely. So there was some really great things there.
That's pyramid energy.
Yeah. Another exciting feature.
Yeah, that's right. A whole subject in itself. Are you going to go into the emotions and the clearing part, or is that what you're saving?
Yes, we're
good.
Say saving the last for best for last, but
we still have a little time. So
what has been really fun working with the oils, and there are oils that do, you know, lend to certain aspects greater than others. I have found, and some of you viewing may want to play with this a little bit, just taking some of the single oils like lavender and geranium, chamomile, marjoram, and just playing and mixing a little bit together and just seeing what you create yourself, and it's really fun. I will say this, unless you're a chemist and you know the properties in the oil, if you're trying to make an oil for a very specific purpose, you may neutralize the effect that you're hoping to accomplish, because if you take, for example, eucalyptus, radiata, and oregano and thyme that are all high in phenols and mix them together because you want to create like an antiviral agent, you will neutralize that effect. They have to be mixed very specifically for their constituent activity in order to enhance it instead of neutralize it. But for creating fragrances, you can mix and play with them and have a lot of fun.
I see.
And
but you won't do any damage to yourself by so doing.
You will never, in fact, this I can say, using oils topically, you will never, ever have a problem as long as they're pure quality oils. Now, a couple of things that I will just mention for caution in case it happens, because it has happened. A little 2-year-old boy drank 10 milliliters of clove oil. And the parents did not know what to do. Now, why they left the bottle open, you know, it just happened, but he's in a coma, and whether he comes out of the coma or not, we don't know. But if the parents would have known that the moment this happened, if they would have taken 4 ounces of olive oil and just put it down him instantly, it would have prevented that from happening. And so in any time, if you leave
would
the bottle...
Would that have diluted the clove oil?
It dilutes the clove oil.
And it may have helped to move it right through the bowel, too.
Yeah, the sad part is, I don't know all the particulars, but likely they gave him water, which is a natural thing to do, thinking the water will dilute it. And I've seen people do this, you know, use oils and then think water's going to dilute it. It does not. Water does not dilute it.
Look at water and oil. I mean,
Oh, golly. When we were in France last, a gentleman that I work with, it's known and been around oils for years, we were cleaning the separator, and he splashed some thyme oil in his eye. And he instantly reached for the water to rinse his eye with, and I yelled at him and says, "No, you can't." And we ran inside and grabbed some olive oil and got in his eye, and it stopped it instantly. You can't thin oil with water. So for those of you that are watching, make a note. In any case,
very good point.
Always thin with another vegetable oil. Whether you splash it in your eye, because it will burn and sting. If you were to pour straight cinnamon oil on your hand, it would sting and burn the skin, because your spice oils and citrus oils and some of the conifer oils are very caustic to the skin, because it's a very concentrated form. And if that happens, just put some olive oil on it, or sesame oil, almond oil, whatever you have in the home, and it'll thin it out, and you won't have a problem. So that's just a little...
So it can be a nut oil too?
Exactly.
Okay.
Oh yes, any nut oil, any oil like that will work as a thinning agent, something that will emulsify the essential oil.
Got it.
You know, even a lotion, you know, if you have nothing else and you've got a body lotion there, put it on, you know, that'll work.
Now you teach what combinations, or do you have any kind of publication that talks about what combinations are good for what therapeutic values?
I'm writing a book, and I'm hoping to have my first booklet out in April.
Okay.
I'm pushing for that.
Wonderful.
Outside that, there are some literature available, and you could get that through the phone number that you gave.
Okay, fine. Fine.
I've been so busy researching and teaching that it's hard to take time
to write. Right,
much.
exactly. But that's very valuable information.
Yes,
so people don't waste the oils on the one hand and waste their time.
Exactly.
And there are ways, like you mentioned peppermint before, which acts as an amplifier for various other oils.
Absolutely. And I was thinking, your mother that had the stroke, some oils that has been found in the clinic in Scottsdale that have been very helpful for that type of condition and for increasing the oxygen and the circulation has been helichrysum oil, cypress, peppermint, and juniper. These have been found very, very beneficial for that.
Fantastic.
So you know, you can experiment a little bit, and then working through
I can just rub it on her feet,
legs, the neck, here on the carotid artery to get it into the bloodstream.
Yep.
You know, is really invaluable, and so that'll be fun.
Oh, wonderful.
All right, coming back.
Yes.
To emotions. Some of the oils that you'll love working with for the emotions, for example, lavender is what I refer to as the universal oil, because it just is so wonderful. You can use it right out of the bottle. You don't have to be afraid of it as long as it's pure and you know where it's coming from. This is number one. All right? If you're not sure, then always thin it with a vegetable oil. But pure lavender oil, you can put it right on the body, any place on the body. It's so soothing, it's so relaxing, like for insomnia. If you're feeling depressed, you can take frankincense oil, and 1 or 2 drops of frankincense oil. Actually, I'll give you a recipe. 3 drops of frankincense, 1 drop of lavender, and 1 drop of Ylang Ylang is really wonderful for lifting that depressed feeling. Or if you don't have a Ylang Ylang and you've got sandalwood, you can use frankincense and sandalwood with lavender. It really lifts. Myrrh is good as well, but sandalwood is a little better than myrrh for an antidepressant, you know, condition. By putting Ylang Ylang, I like putting Ylang Ylang with it because Ylang Ylang balances the male and female energies in our body, and when we're depressed, one of those energies kind of gets a little dominating, and we want to bring that back to balance. And so the Ylang Ylang helps to do that, and the sandalwood and frankincense helps oxygenate, and lavender's aldehydes and esters are calming. They are known as sedating to the system, and so that puts us in a feeling of just feeling more at peace.
Sure.
And then if you have orange oil,
balance.
Yeah. You know, it's kind of like, I get excited because it's kind of like cooking a turkey. You know, you can add a couple of oils and you can sample it, and if you don't like it, you can add another oil or 2 and just enhance it. Now with this formula, you want to play a little bit, then take and put a couple drops of orange oil in it, and oh, it's just exquisite.
It's so fragrant.
Oh, it is, you know, and it creates kind of a tropical, exotic, with a little woody musk hint to it. That's, and you gentlemen will love putting it on as an aftershave. It'll be so nice. But the orange oil, mandarin is really good for this. It helps to bring us back to the point of remembering good times. And so it has a tendency to return us to that child inside, and we start remembering happy times in childhood. And another one that's fun, like if you want to create a beautiful oil at Christmas time, a little cinnamon, like a drop of cinnamon, 5 drops of orange oil, a drop of spruce oil or a drop of fir oil, and oh, you should put at least a drop of clove oil in, and you create such a beautiful fragrance that will remind you instantly of Christmas. And what happens is when we take some of these beautiful fragrances that will bring us back to some of these childhood experiences, and one of the ancient traditions that I learned about in the Temple of Philae from studying the hieroglyphics and being allowed in their sacred ritual room is that they would take their people that wanted to go through this ritual, because if I may explain just a little bit, the ritual was for the purpose of cleansing their body of all emotional baggage. Now that's not the language they use, but
sure,
they call it evil deities. To get it out of their body, because their belief was that they need to go into the next life and progress and make a full circle back around to come back in their body they left in the tomb. If they didn't let go of all this emotional baggage, they couldn't make the trip. And so they would go through an actual 3-day ritual. And they started out just at sunrise, or just before sunrise, because they would do it as the sun was coming up. They would go into a tub of water that was covered with oils and totally cover their body with oils and go completely into an immersion. Then they would come up out of the water as the sun was coming up. Then they would go into a room that was totally dark, I mean sealed practically, no windows, and they would lie with their head to the east and their feet to the west. Very interesting thought. And then they would have 2 people that were, we would call them facilitators. One would stay at the feet, one would stand at the head, and they would anoint them with different oils. But during this whole 3-day process, there was never a sound ever spoken or heard by all 3 people. Total silence. And the belief was that the oils would work through the body, pushing these evil deities out, and by keeping the silence there, they would go away because they couldn't find their way back by sound. And so the oils released this. They released this. And we know that we have to shut the sight down, and we have to shut different senses down if we want to amplify another sense of our body. You know, if we close our eyes, close our ears, it makes our olfactory very, very sensitive.
Right.
And in fact, when I'm teaching people how to smell oils and identify constituents and purity, we shut the eyes and the ears down. And and they get really excited how much greater they can smell doing that. So you can practice that at home with your oils. And in fact, take a perfume oil and get a good, pure quality essential oil, and just smell one and the other, and that'll give you an idea. But some of the oils that they used in Egypt for these rituals, one of their primary oils naturally was lotus. And lotus oil has not existed for hundreds of years, unfortunately, but it's coming back. And in fact, we are going to start growing it this month.
I was just going to ask, really?
It's really exciting, and we do have a person in Egypt who is now producing lotus oil for us. But that was their #1 oil they used for their emotional work, second with rose and frankincense. Frankincense and sandalwood were very, very much used by the Egyptian people. They also used a lot of jasmine. Jasmine was really, really accepted by the Egyptian people. So these were some of their favorite oils that they worked with. But
is there a particular oil or 2 that is for the clearing rather than for remembering necessarily childhood emotions? I think mainly people in New York seem to be very interested in clearing things like anger, rage, early childhood trauma, things like that.
Exactly. Mitchell, I found the benefit in this work in creating blends, because it creates a higher harmonic frequency to address some of these areas more specifically. But some of the single oils that I've worked with in this application, like coming back to anger, because anger is an emotion that interferes in our life processes in every aspect.
Sure does.
And we store that emotion in the liver. You know, we also store it in fat cells, and that's why some of us, you know, have a little extra. So it creates a little insulation there, protection.
Buffer.
You know, but some of the oils I found have been really beneficial for releasing anger emotion, one of the things that I do first is I put oils on the bottom of my feet, or if I have someone there, I have them put the oils on the bottom of my feet first. And the oils I use on my are lavender and chamomile, rosewood, ylang ylang. You know, a combination of any 2 or 3 is fine to start with. And then just give yourself a few moments to just let it feel. You know, some of you won't feel anything, others will feel kind of like an electrical tingling feeling in the feet as it starts to increase the circulation and stimulate the nerve transmission. Then you can put oils up here on the liver. Now, one of the oils that I found through the British Museum Library in studying ancient history was the Roman soldiers used a lot of Roman chamomile, and that's maybe how it got its coined term. But the Roman chamomile was believed to have been used perhaps for creating a feeling of security, a feeling of inner strength. And one of the reasons that we hold so much anger inside is because of fear. And we have that fear because we don't have the inner security and the inner strength. And so by putting a little chamomile on there with ylang ylang and spruce, it is really nice.
Beautiful.
And all of a sudden you'll start, it's really hard, and this is one of the areas that we don't have documentation.
I've got to tell you, we've got about 12 more seconds before we run out of time.
Is just allow it. Just be quiet, and in a room where there's no noise. Don't play music, because this is not what you're trying to do. You're trying to let go of all this, not take
Be silent and be tranquil, in other words.
Exactly. That was the real secret. Real secret.
Listen, I hate to tell you, this has been so interesting. It's been horrible to end this. Really. Thanks so much for being on.
Thank you.
Really.